In this lecture we are going to talk about the functions. So let's create another playground. I'm going to call these functions. And let's open this up and remove this. So the functions are like a bigger part. So we have like constants, variables, if statements. These are like a small blocks of building an application. When the functions are the bigger blocks which are taking the main part of our application building. So each function is going to do some specific task that we are going to give to function. For example, imagine if you have a cook in your cafe, and your cook knows how to make nice cakes, but this is the only thing he knows. You cannot tell your cook go and make a coffee, because your cook knows only how to make cakes. So imagine you have a function which is your cook, and you are going to give him some ingredients or give him an instruction to make a cake, and he's going to make a cake. And then you have another employee, another function, that when you need a coffee, you are going to go to this employee and tell him I need a coffee. So imagine these are the different functions, and each function does a specific job. So either making a coffee or making a cake, or I don't know, or cleaning the floor, etc. So let's write a function. There are three different types of function. In order to write a function, we use func keyword. Then we specify the function name. For example, I'm going to say make a cake. And pay attention how we are using the variable or function names. It's always good to name your functions, your variables, exactly what they are doing. So the name should have some kind of meaning. You can't. It's very bad practice to call the function, for example, func1, because imagine if, let's say, in few years you are going to get back to your code and try to read your code and understand what's going on, and then you have a function called function. Even if you are working with someone in a team or in a bigger company, you are going to read other people's code, and then they are going to read your code. So you want to name your functions, your variables with some meaningful names, so if another person comes and read your code, he will understand what's going on. Also in Swift we are using camel casing. So what's the camel casing? The first word always starts with small letter. So if I am going to call my function make, and then the second word, cake, starts with capital. So it doesn't matter what how many words you have. For example, welcome to my house. This is a function name, and it's used camel casing. So each word, apart from the first one, starts with capital. So we have the func keyword, then we give a name to our function, then we open and close parentheses. So now our Swift compiler knows that this is a function, and every function should have a block of code that is going to be executed when we are calling this function. That's why we put a curly braces. So whatever, when this function call is being called, all the code here, whatever we write, this is like what our function is going to do. So for example, the welcome to my house function is going to say print. So whenever we call this function, we say welcome. So this is the first type of function, and this function in our parentheses here, it doesn't take any parameters. So this function has no parameters, and also the function doesn't have a return value. So another type of function, I'm going to call this function with parameters, and here, when we put our braces, we're going to give some parameters to this function. So for example, imagine if this was your cook, so you are asking it to make a cake and you are going to pass the ingredients, or you are going to say, you know, the customer doesn't like cherry on top. So you say should have cherry, and this is a boolean. So we indicate the type. In the function parameters, you always have to indicate what type of parameter this is. So for example, func with parameter, this is one parameter. If the cake, for example, should have a cherry on top, and we have two options, it's either yes or no, because it's a boolean. Then we can say customer name, and this is a type of string because it's the name of the person, so it's a text, so the type of the string. And then we can also pass like a customer age, and this is a type of integer. So now in this function where the code is here, we have access to these constants. So imagine if we have these constants declared here, just they are parameters of our function and we can use it. So what I'm going to do, for example, that now we know how to use if statements. First, let's say print, and I want to print my customer name. So I can copy this and paste it here. So when I use my function, it will print my customer name. Then I can say if, and we are going to use the customer age, if customer age is greater than 18, then I'm going to say print put chocolate on top. So that's it. We're not going to have an else statement. And then we're going to say if, then we're going to check if we should have a cherry. So we say should have a cherry, and that's it. We're not going to say if it's true or false, because by default it checks if this value is true or false. Then we say print put some cherry on top. So this is another function with a parameter. So let's first look at this function here. So we have a function. How we are going to use our function? For example, imagine I want to tell this function to do whatever it knows how to do. So this function knows only how to print a welcome home. So if I say, if I want to call this function, I'm going to say welcome to my house, and then we put the function name, whatever it is, and open and close the parenthesis here. And this, what it will do, if I run my code, you will see that it says welcome to my house. But then you may say, why instead of writing a function and putting a print statement inside the function, you didn't just say like print welcome to my house here? It would have same effect. The reason is I can call this function as many times as I want. So if I say welcome to my house again, and if I run, it's going to be printing it twice. Or if I do it 10 times, it's going to print 10 times. So the main thing of the function is reusability of the function. So we write the code once and we can reuse this part more than once. Anytime we want, we can reuse this function. Also, it makes our code much clearer because we don't want to put all the things inside one place. So we want to separate them into different functions. So each function can take a specific task, and this function knows how to do this task and he knows how to do this best. So we don't want to have another function telling print welcome. So this was the first simple function that doesn't have any parameters or doesn't return any parameter. The second function, let's try to call this function, and you will see what's the difference here. So if I say func with parameters, and you will see that here we cannot just say func with parameters, and when we call this function, Xcode automatically gives us all the different parameters that we need to pass to this function. If, for example, I were going to use like this will not be correct because there are specific parameters that this function has to receive before it can be called. So Xcode is telling us that our arguments are missing. So if I click on the fix, it will put the first argument. Then it will tell me that another argument is missing. And if I put fix, it will put the second argument. And finally, there is another argument is missing, and it can put all them one by one. So when you have a function with parameters, you have to pass the parameters to the function. There are some exceptions that you set some parameters by default. We're going to talk about this more later, but just for sake of an example, I can show it to you now. So if we should have cherry, I can say that this is a boolean and it equals to true. So by default we set the parameters. So if I try to call the function now, say func with parameters, now if I don't pass the cherry part, it's not going to complain. And the reason is because this, if I don't pass anything, I already have a value here as true. So it's going to take the true part from here. But don't pay attention to this too much now, because this is a separate case. We're going to use it later on. So let me fix my function here, and I'm going to pass some parameters to my function. And I'm going to say should have a cherry, let's say false, because I don't want to have a cherry. Customer name, let's put it Bob. And customer age, I'm going to put this 20. So if I run my code now, you will see that it prints Bob because we are printing the customer name. Then it checks if the customer age is greater than 18. It says put chocolate on top. And when it comes to the cherry, should have cherry on top. It doesn't print put some cherry on top because we don't want some cherry. But now imagine there is another customer. So we say func with parameters. Should have cherry, we want to have cherry. So we say true. Customer name, David. Customer age, I'm going to put 17 here. And if I run the code now, it will print another customer here, David. Then it will not print put chocolate on top because my customer is under 18. So this code doesn't run. And then put some cherry on top because this customer wants cherry. So imagine this is a code that will make a coffee for you or a cake, and you just pass some kind of parameters that you want, and it will always make the coffee or the cake depending on the parameters you pass to it. So let's delete this.